From the arena to the front office, this is Scoreboard. I'm Chris Titley, and each episode brings you stories from the game of sport, where mindset, money, and meaning shape what comes next. Athletes, coaches, owners, and business leaders unpack the moments that matter, because the scoreboard isn't just about winning, it's about life beyond the game. This episode is powered by Swyftx, Australia's top-rated crypto exchange and proudly homegrown, just like many of the athletes and business leaders we feature on Scoreboard. Now let's get to today's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by David Hanham, the CEO of the Queensland Rugby Union, the QRU. David, thank you for being part of Scoreboard on what is a glorious morning here on Tuesday, the 1st of July.
Beautiful Brisbane morning. Up early this morning, going for a walk through Brecky Creek. Beautiful place to live, Brizzy,
isn't it? Every day, apart from yesterday. Yesterday was a bit miserable.
Actually, it was cold. I was in Townsville on the weekend, and I remember I came in. It was actually cold in Townsville, so it was cold in Brizzy. But, mate, beautiful place to live.
Beautiful place to live, and a big 24, 48 hours for you with the British and Irish Lions in town, playing Queensland tomorrow night at Suncorp Stadium. You pumped?
I'm pumped, mate. I reckon, for people that haven't been to a Lions game, 40,000 Lions fans hitting our shores. It'll only continue to grow heading into the Wallabies Lions game, but massive for us. Yes. The last time we beat them was 1971.
Right.
They came over. They were flying to play New Zealand in the series, and they thought they'd play one game to get themselves ready for the New Zealand series. They played against Queensland at Ballymore, and they actually put this little toy line up for grabs, thinking we're just going to trounce these blokes in Queensland on our way through, get a little bit of a curtain raiser game, and
just a warm up.
Yeah, just a warm up. Yep. Didn't realise the Queensland spirit. 16-11, we win. No tries.
No tries. Well, there's the 4-point tries back then, wasn't it, as well? Yeah.
So, but again, that's just a great moment in our history, and that was kind of a turning point. But this game on Wednesday, there'll be 52,000 people at Suncorp. It's bloody exciting. And, the spirit of that Northern Hemisphere, singing songs and just great.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in a press conference yesterday it was like schoolies for 50-year-olds.
That's right. That's the best way to explain it. Schoolies week for 50-year-olds.
It's their time away from work. They've come over, well, they're leaving their summer, but they're coming over here to a beautiful winter as well. And some other big news as well with Jock Campbell today as well.
Yeah, no, Jock's re-signed, which is good. We've got pretty much that sort of rounds off our list now for next season. And Jock's a great player. He's been part of it. He wants to continue to play good football here. And, we're really pleased. We've got a good list. Obviously, Les is around for another year. So that's been a real positive for us. And, we're excited that Les gets the transition to become the Wallabies coach. And we've been part of that journey. Good times ahead, which is positive.
Yeah, I was going to say, just rugby's had its ups and downs, and we've got some good events coming. We've got the Women's World Cup, the Men's World Cup. We've got the Lions. Are we at a pivotal point for rugby?
I reckon we are. I know in Queensland, we've got a great foundation. We've got probably close to 80,000 players that participate in rugby across the state. You've got a Lions series coming, 40,000 fans, as I mentioned, 52,000 at Suncorp. Got a Rugby World Cup in 2027 here in Australia, which, again, will be a massive event. It's the third biggest global sporting event in the world outside of the Soccer World Cup and the Olympics. In 2029, you got the Women's World Cup, which, the growth of the women's game's been phenomenal. And then in 32, Rugby Sevens in the Brisbane Olympics. So we're not going to get in rugby a better runway of tentpole events to set our sport up for success. And I think the next 3 years for us in Queensland from this Lions series to a World Cup are critical. I think there's all the opportunities there. We just got to execute that.
Yeah, and we're in a pretty competitive era with broadcasting rights and the other codes sort of rising from grassroots. And in Brisbane, we've got the AFL, which the Lions took a little, the premiership and little eyeballs, et cetera, and bandwagging, et cetera. What are we doing as a rugby doing as a state as opposed to kind of get more eyeballs, more engagement, et cetera? Yeah,
well, I think, as I said, the first thing is creating great content that people are attracted to. So, we're lucky to have those big events that I mentioned before. I think from a Reds perspective, from our side, the unique sort of part of Queensland Rugby is we're a connected pathway to the community game. So we've got that tribalism that's there. Team performance has been a big part for us, is getting our team performance up to a point where we're actually a top 3 team on a regular basis. And we've had blips of success with Connolly and then Ewan McKenzie. But we're building, I think we're building a really sustainable way to being a top 3 team. We had, era of Brad Thorne, which was a really good cultural reset. Some controversial decisions probably back in 2018, 2019 when Brad came on. There was a few players that he felt that didn't fit the culture and standards and behaviours. So we backed a young group, and that young group now are your Fraser McWrights, your Harry Wilsons, your Tate McDermotts, etc. So that was a pivotal moment for us. If I look at sort of the history of where we are today, Brad got us to 7th on the table and did an amazing job to get to that point. And then we identified that, well, how do we go to that next level? When we needed to pull in a coach that had experienced, professional rugby globally and had success. So we looked hard, and obviously there was a sort of sliding door moment when Les was coaching at London Irish over in the Premiership rugby in the Northern Hemisphere, and the club went into administration, unfortunately. So Les became available when we were in market, and he happened to be a Queenslander. That was a nice fit. Obviously played rugby league for the Maroons and the Bears in his early years, and getting Les on board with the coaching group he's put together has taken us up. And obviously we didn't finish where we'd like to have finished this year. We finished 5th. We've had 2 fifth places under Les's tenure. Ultimately, we want to be top 3. And, there's probably 2 or 3 games this year that, we should have won that we didn't, that would have put us in a strong position to get there. So we've got that now. And obviously Les comes, again next year. And then we're now looking at what's the next evolution.
And a new coach, obviously, because he's taking that next step up.
That's right. So, But they're building blocks. And, people want success. We all want success really quickly. But if I look at it, we've actually built some good foundations. So team performance is another driver of how do we grow the fan base. And I know, I was lucky enough to be around in 2011 when Ewan McKenzie took on the role in 2010, a quick rise to winning the competition. And we were having average crowds of 25, 28,000. In fact, back then, I think we were... It
was late teens, I remember,
Yeah. So, that's a key driver of it for us. And then the broadcast has been an interesting one. I think, Stan have done a good job and Channel 9. That's been renewed. The Super Rugby competition this year, there were some big decisions. Choose your hard decision. Do you keep the Rebels in the competition, 5 Super Rugby teams in Australia, or do you restructure it? My personal view is it's the right decision. We don't have enough talented athletes in a competitive landscape, as you mentioned, to support 5 teams when you're playing the best country in the world in rugby. So, we had to reduce the number of teams down from 5 to 4. That strengthened the 4 teams with better talent, so gave them more depth. And obviously there's the funding and the distribution of funds for that as well. So that's a key moment for us, and we're seeing the benefit of that decision by Dan Herbert and Phil Waugh. So people want to know what's the silver bullet. It's a number of things that you need to put in place to build long-term success. And for us at the Reds, that's everything from a strong academy. So, attracting young, talented players, boys and girls these days, and securing them. You're looking at now the age of contracts is starting at the age of 15.
Wow. Okay. So it's a bit different to our era.
Yeah. Well, we were lucky, mate. We might have got a hamburger and
that's
Coke
right.
just to hang around a little bit longer. So they're the building blocks. But look, it's I think we've got an opportunity if we can stay as a top 3 team, and we can leverage the World Cup and the Lions series, we can build off the back of that into a Women's World Cup and then the Olympics.
During the time that you mentioned, the 2018s, et cetera, and the growth of other sports, you've seen sort of, I suppose, different products from different sports. We've seen the 2020 explode. You've seen new rules, new innovation, the golden point and 2-point field goals in league, et cetera.
Yep.
Rugby has got the 7s, has always had the 7s. How important is that, I suppose, in terms of a different product and boosting that into awareness of rugby? It's
interesting. Just to answer the first question on the product, one of the advantages of rugby is it's a global game, but one of the challenges of rugby is a lot of the decisions around the laws of the game get sort of made in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, they're happy for a game to be decided by penalty kicks.
That's their style.
That's their style. But over here, when you're competing against products like the NRL and AFL, which is free flowing, we've had to really look hard at how do we fix that and make the game more free flowing. So there's a bunch of stuff we've done in Super Rugby around, quicker scrum resets, get the ball out of the back of a ruck so the ball doesn't sit there too long, just game management, goal line dropouts, 20-minute red cards. So you don't have a red card and then it just ruins the whole game. So that's been a positive on the product. On the sevens side of it, it's an Olympic sport, it's a Commonwealth Games sport. It's the fastest growing participation sector for our game at a community level, and particularly women. And it's quite simple. I mean, sevens is the easiest product to pick up as a new product. You've got 7 people on a field. You can catch, pass, run, tackle. There's not the complexities of what a 15-a-side game is. You only need probably 10 people, a couple of reserves, and so it's easy for schools to adopt it rather than 15-a-side. You probably need to have a squad of 18, 19. It's safer, just statistically with injuries and those bits. So, and it's global. And the women's players, they were probably not a known fact is after the Rio Olympics when they won gold, that was the catalyst moment for them to become full-time contracted athletes. So I know NRL and AFL will talk about their players being full-time. Well, rugby was probably the first mover on that. And now women's sevens, you've got Charlotte Caslick, Maddie Levi.
Yeah.
They're getting paid as much as
on as well.
Yeah. So, it's been it's a critical part, and, it's an offering that we can give at a community level that grows the game. But then there's, a pathway to the biggest global event in the world being the Olympics.
And we are the Queensland Reds. We're Brisbane-based, centric, head office, etc. But how important is the rural and regional areas in Queensland to grow the game?
Oh, it's massive. It's huge. I mean, I was up in Townsville on the weekend. We had our Queensland Country Championships there, and it was a really pleasing moment, to sort of look out. I was watching the under-18 girls, and, mate, 5 or 6 years ago, it didn't exist. Now there's pathways for young
they
girls.
would say, you're not going to play rugby because there's no teams. You can't play against anyone. Sorry, I'll do another sport.
If you can't see it, how do you get involved in it? So there's great pathways there now, and I think that's critical. If you're going to be strong in Queensland in any sport, you're going to have to make the game more accessible. We launched yesterday with the government. We launched a program to get into more primary schools in regional areas. That's where we're going to allocate the investment. So, Gympie, Burdekin, Innisfail, some of these areas where kids might not have played rugby before at that level. So it's almost like it's the widening of the funnel that we said if we can give a kid, a boy or girl, access to the game, and sevens is the program we're going to run there, and their willingness and their, you've played rugby, I've played rugby, right? So my connection to rugby came through my father, who was from New Zealand, came over when he was in his 20s. I was obviously destined to play rugby. There was probably no choice.
Yes.
But,
in the blood.
These young girls are going to be mothers of young children. And if they've participated in the sport, playing is one element, could be as a fan, the likelihood of their kids playing rugby is going to increase. So that's where our focus needs to be, is a long game on participation.
In terms of youth participation, having kids that are, my oldest is 12, a lot of them play touch, right?
Yeah.
And then they sort of play touch and they go, where do we kind of go now? And there's a bit of a pathway now, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah.
Into sevens.
It is. And from an elite perspective, I know speaking to our guys that run the Queensland Academy of Sports Sevens, they say it's interesting that they will recruit athletes for the top level and teach them rugby. So,
the touch skills,
touch football players are great. It's a great pathway. I mean, you can play rugby league, you can keep playing touch, you can play rugby union, you can be fully contracted as a female player to play for Australia. So there's great pathways and opportunities now that didn't exist when we were going through the system.
No.
Some of these things just don't exist. So there's more offerings and more opportunity.
There was definitely no structured touch competitions, broadly speaking, apart from UQ on Wednesday night or something. That was about
social
it.
Social touch. You pull your hammy if you or your calf muscle.
That's definitely now.
That's right.
David, your involvement in rugby, you've been at the QRU for 22 odd years now.
Yeah.
How did that come about? And obviously, you mentioned your father involved in rugby. You played a little bit of rugby. Your interest in rugby beyond the game of playing.
Yeah. Oh, look, I got involved. I mean, obviously, rugby's been part of my life, and I was actually, when I left school, I went in to do an electrician apprenticeship. So my father owned a commercial fit-out business, co-owner of a commercial fit-out business, and I got involved in that. 3 older brothers, two were chippies. I was the sparky, and my other brother went off and worked in the tax office. So obviously a different path for him. But I remember doing it for 2 years, and then sort of sitting there. I was back at Churchy doing a job for Churchy in the electrical industry, and I was sitting there, and I remember listening to one of the guys I was working with. He would have been in his 50s, complaining about how much he didn't enjoy his job, and I I was only, I was 19, 20 at the time. And I just was sitting there reflecting, going, I just don't want to be that.
Yep.
I don't want to do a job. If I'm not enjoying it today, I don't want to be sitting there reflecting in my 50s or 60s.
Being a sad old man.
I wish I didn't.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't do it. So, that was a moment for me when I look back to the impact of the game for me, and I sort of reflected, going, well, what do I want to do? And I didn't know at the time. An opportunity came up to be a development officer at East Rugby, and I thought I'll give it a crack because I love rugby. It was obviously a pretty obvious fit, and what I reflect on it now, what the thing for me was that I've got to do a job that is purpose-led. I can't just do a job for the sake of earning an income and ticking a box. So the passion and purpose is really
make
important.
An impact as well.
Yeah. Knowing that you're doing something that's greater than your own self, and you can support others and make a difference. And that's 23 years, different roles and different opportunities. That's what's kept me engaged in the game and the role particularly. So it's been an interesting journey, but one that started off going down the trade path, but ended up.
Yeah, and it was the start, or the sort of end of the golden era of rugby for Australian Wallabies, wasn't it? The 99 to 03, and you started in 03 or 2?
Well, I started 02 at East.
02 at East, and then the 03 World Cup. We've had Matt Coburn on recently talking about that experience, the sort of the highs and lows of the World Cups from 03 and 99.
But it was a golden era.
Golden era. Yeah. And then what was your first role at QRU?
I came in as I was at East, and then Brisbane development manager. So basically my job was to manage the development officers.
Coach the coaches.
Yeah. And then I went from that role into heading up coach education, so running coach and match official education. So that was interesting. I was a coach, but trying to run the match officials as well was a
So did you get on the tools as a coach?
Yeah. I coached. I coached all the way through. I probably haven't coached since 2008. I coached, obviously, Premier grade down at East Rugby, which was great fun. I love coaching, and it was funny. Again, when I finished coaching, what I reflected on, I loved the highs and lows of a game day, the adrenaline of making a final and winning or losing, and what you learned out of your losses and your wins. But what I miss about it is the people part, the human part of again helping people be better and advancing. And it's, as you know, if you've been involved in coaching in any form, it's sort of you move away from these guys, and then I catch up at a reunion, and
there's a deep connection there.
You just pick back up where you were. It's the great part of.
And reminisce on stories that didn't happen, but you exaggerate.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember that time you ran 40 metres? I think it was 45.
Right. But those bonds, right, they're lifelong bonds, and I think that's the beauty of coaching in any form. It's helping people, improve and being part of that, and to allow that to happen. My best coaches, that trust equation, are they credible and reliable, and have you got a connection you can trust them to, support you and develop you, and so. Yeah, it was a really fun time. I do miss the coaching part. I've sort of applied it now more to the work side of it. But the on-field coaching was great fun.
With just on the coaching and the volunteers and the referees, etc. Are you seeing any patterns, I suppose, in terms of shortages or supply and demand? Yeah,
the coaching's actually quite strong. We'd love to see more female coaches, and again, and that's starting to come to fruition. Actually, a lot of the clubs now are making the decision to appoint female coaches for the female teams, and that's been a positive. But we'd love to see encourage more of that. I'd love to see more female participation at committee levels at clubs, and it's starting to develop. The match official part is actually quite interesting. It's getting the younger generation to participate in refereeing, and in certain parts of the state, it's been really strong. Which is really good to see. And what's I think also the other part is actually encouraging players that finish their playing career to get involved in refereeing. And I don't know if you remember, these guys, they're probably a bit younger than us, but they're now international referees. Nick Berry played for the Reds. Yep. He's now an international referee.
Halfback? No.
Halfback, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Dallin Murphy played for Brothers, fullback, played 10, then international referee. Yep. So, it's great to see that there's a pathway into that side for people that are wanting to go to the next level.
Yep.
So.
And as CEO of the Reds, how do you sort of view grassroots? Do you keep an eye on things? Do you keep an eye on the club system? How do you sort of from above?
Yeah, it's an interesting part of my role. So QRU own the Reds and are responsible to grow the game. So, you're always looking at both. How do we get the team to perform on the field at Suncorp Stadium? We've got a network of development officers that are all across the state of Queensland, so their role is to work with the clubs and schools to grow the game. We're constantly looking at what you raised before around sevens. What are the different programs or products that we can put out into the market to stimulate and encourage growth? How do we work with our clubs to make sure that they become more resilient businesses? With 140 clubs, there are effectively 140 businesses.
Yep. With the P&L,
yeah. So, and the more successful our clubs are, the better the game goes. So, yeah.
And David, so 22 years, you've seen the ups and downs of rugby. You've been CEO for 6 years.
Yeah, 6 years since the back end of 18, 19. Yeah.
6 years now. The success of a club, you mentioned on-field performance is one thing. Behind the scenes, what else needs to make a good club and a legacy for you to say, I've left it at year X and it's in a good spot?
No, it's a good point. Obviously, for us, a little bit of context. So, obviously, the financial piece for us is really critical. So, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we had a fairly significant debt profile. So we had to really focus on strategies leading into COVID, actually, ironically, to consolidate and reshape the business and looking at how do we create a point of difference in our model as we move into this sort of golden runway. So once we got rid of all that debt through just some cost-saving measures and some on-field performance, we looked hard at our commercial framework. So our sponsorship. One of the unique selling points of our sponsorship for QRU is that when you invest in, you look at the sponsors like Santos, Rio, we've got BMS, Alliance Airlines currently, as just to name a few. How do you involve them in both parts of the business? So the Reds, but also the community game. And there's a lot of corporates, as you know, looking for their ability to connect with community, but also tell their story through the brand or the retail brand. So that's been a really key part, the relationship side of it and how we engage and retain those partners and grow their investment over time and grow their value and return. The other part was also looking at one of rugby's, I guess, uniquenesses is there is a wealth within the game that love the game. So people that have got the capacity to give. So we established 4 years ago a foundation, so a philanthropic part of our business. We're now able to generate $1 million of donations that are effectively going towards both the Reds Academy and community game and also supporting Ballymore. So that's been, from a commercial perspective, they're probably two things that really stand out outside of more ticket sales, more hospitality, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The other part for us is Ballymore. So that's the other part of our business. And Ballymore has been around for over 50 years, but one of its issues was an asset with great memories and a lot of nostalgia that people often talk about the experience of Ballymore, which is a great sort of selling point. But the challenge of the asset, it was losing $1.5 million a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, if you looked at the financial performance of the QRU, the Reds had to make a final every year to offset the operating loss of Ballymore. So that it was set up for failure.
Yep.
So that was probably, from my perspective, one of the key focus. If we can turn the financial fortunes of Ballymore around and it becomes a profitable asset that supports our core business, which is to grow the game and to get the Reds to perform, then we're going to be more resilient and we're going to be able to make those investments. And I think it's pretty simple. The sporting organisations with a balance sheet that's strong enough to invest and be resilient are the ones that will ultimately rise to the top over time.
Yeah.
And so, that was really just the commercialisation. We got funding to build the new high performance centre at Ballymore called the BMS National Rugby Training Centre. Our old offices were able to tenant those commercially. And now we've got this wonderful master plan where we can develop over 4,000 square metres of either health education. So, anything from, radiology, sports physicians, a medical precinct.
It's a hub. Yeah.
It's a hub.
Yeah.
So Ballymore's future is really about high performance. It's about, health and well-being and a commercial engine that supports the sustained success of Reds in the community game.
And what sort of what other sports do you think would be a good fit for Ballymore or home or use case for Ballymore?
Yeah, well, look, our strategy, obviously, Reds are at Suncorp. People often ask me, are the Reds going to come back to Ballymore? I was like, well, in reality, owning stadium is a very expensive exercise, the reason government own them. So, reviewing sort of what we need from a sports perspective, is that we feel like a smaller venue of around 8,000 to 9,000 in the core of the stadium would be the capacity level we think Ballymore supports, which then opens it up for women's sport. Going and hiring Suncorp, if you're getting 6,000 people, is not the right venue to be hosting those games.
Yeah, it's a loss-making exercise.
Correct. You're going to lose money, and the fan experience is going to be pretty rubbish.
True. So
smaller venues, better atmosphere, more community orientated. Ballymore's got 3 fields. We want an extra field. So you could have anything at Ballymore from a touch football championship, right through to the Wallaroos playing, against another international team,
or soccer or football,
exactly. Whatever it may be. We've had we actually had NFL flag football there. They're national champs there. So our view is it's multi-sport and multi-purpose, but it needs. We need to turn the financial tide around. So we've got it back to being a break-even venue in the next sort of 5 years. As part of this sort of ignite phase for rugby with the World Cups, is to turn it into a profitable asset.
Just going to touch on the sponsorship side of things. Some sponsors come and go, but there's the ones you want a long term. What are you offering, or how are you getting them to sign longer term deals so it's not a chop and change every year?
Yeah,
you're back on the road again, knocking on doors.
Yeah, I think it's what I said before. It's identifying firstly what the partner is looking to achieve. I often see, working in the sports industry now for 22, 23 years. The issue with a lot of sports is they come in with the transactional attitude of, well, I'm going to put your logo on the jersey and you're going to get this many people view you. And that's okay when you've got scale. We don't have as big a scale as the NRL and AFL do in Queensland. So we've got to look at other ways to generate that return on investment. That could be business-to-business opportunities where we can sit down with them and identify, well, what clients are you trying to meet that fit our audience? And then work with them on strategy.
Data, some overlay.
Data overlay, but also
sales.
VIP experiences. How do we build relationships? I mean, I'm amazed the people that we can go and meet with that are industry leaders and business CEOs of major corporations that we have the ability to talk to and connect with, and organisations would love that opportunity to come in and elevate their discussion with those people. So that's we can enable that, and I think that's definitely a core part of it, the business to business side. Outside of that, I'd say that the ability to invest in both the professional arm and the community side of the game. And so, if you're like, I look at a partner like Santos. Santos's major objective with us is to work in 2 communities. One is Roma and Narrabri in New South Wales. And each year we run a festival of rugby, which is this amazing event which they invest into. The Reds and Waratahs play a pre-season game. The Sevens go there and play. So the national Sevens team play their carnival. And it just becomes a big corporate event. But ultimately gives them a chance to engage with their clients, but using rugby as the vehicle to create an event that enables them to build relationships and opportunities. So
the activation of that actual sponsorship, as opposed to just like here's a check, see it. Good luck. Give us the metrics. Yeah,
and they're going to Roma. It's an area for us to
Narrabri
promote.
Would be interesting if Chris Latham turned up, which jersey he'd wear.
Yeah, well, he'd have to wear red. Maroon. That's it.
I learned the other day he did play. Matt Coburn said he played 1 game for New South Wales. Really?
I know. You would see him as an outright Queenslander.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. And the social media side of things and the content and the storytelling, sponsors might be looking at that now. How important? I mean, this 22-3 you guys didn't exist. We had MySpace probably, or schoolmates.com or whatever, school friends, etc. Now it's just the era, right? What are sponsors looking for that sort of stuff, and what's QAU doing in terms of being front of mind as well?
Yeah, look, I find now where it's human interest stories. Just doing highlights of how many tries you scored and all that. Yep, that's for a tribal audience. Yeah, we love to see the highlight reel, but from a partner and engagement and growing fan base, they want to know who the person is behind the jersey. They want to know what their likes and dislikes are. That's the market for us. Our most engaging content is more about the human interest lifestyle part of the person rather than who
the
they
person
are.
being the player.
The player, or it could be anyone.
Staff.
It could be staff. It could be the player. It could be the coach.
Yep.
Who is Les Kiss? Yeah, you know him as the coach, but what are his interests? What does he love doing on the weekend?
Yep.
He loves music. He loves going to concerts. The whole
it's relatable. It's sort of
relatable.
This a deeper connection with someone.
Correct.
As opposed to student teacher, or like, they're the, oh my goodness. It's now, actually I can relate to that. They're a human person. They go fishing. I go fishing there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, right. I didn't know that. Oh, next time I'll say good day.
100%. Oh, they love surfing. I love surfing too. I didn't realise that. That's the sort of stuff that I feel if sports are going down that path and and this is not new stuff. I mean, The F1 did it with their show.
The Netflix, yeah.
They want to go behind the scenes and understand a little bit more. So that to me is the value proposition. And then how do you integrate that to campaigns? So if you're doing a deal with an organisation that's got a campaign around, a certain interest story, well, what players have that interest and how can we elevate that?
Yep. So, and the behaviour on social media, it's pretty easy to give feedback now, and it can go dark and it can go into things. Do you read anything on social media about yourself, about the team's performance, about the players?
I can scan the Facebooks and those bits and pieces, but it's funny, isn't it? Like you kind of can look at stuff and you got to put your ego to the side and go, what is this feedback actually focused in on? And how do we learn from it? And, you could have 99 people give you a really good, say on the podcast, 99 people say this was great and one person gives you negative, but what people tend to focus in on is the one negative. So we just look at trends.
Like the share portfolio.
Yeah. It's like,
things are going, well, what about this one? Yeah. It's down 40%.
And how much time are you spending on that? And is that of value or are you just worried about it because one person said one bad thing? So I say to the guys, let's just look at, is there a consistent issue? And if there is, what have we learned from that? Versus it's one person just having a whinge versus 99 that have said something really positive. So more, I said the answer, we more look at it on a trend basis. What is it telling us?
Yep. Yeah. And the feedback that you get from people, how you as a leader now take it all in and prioritise?
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, probably my journey as a CEO over the last 6 years, like, how I would have taken feedback at the beginning versus now. I kind of back to it, see it. It's all relevant information for growth, and you're either going to have a growth mindset that this is actually going to inform a positive impact to the next phase of the business or not, where, if your ego's at the front of it, you tend to brush it off and hit it back and
no, you're not right. I'm right.
Yeah, correct. Like just take it in, take a breath, listen, and observe, and then identify what can we do with that personally or collectively as a business. And that comes from getting things wrong and copping a black eye and going, well, actually, you know what, your ego got in the front of that. So pull back, think about it, and then let's reassess it. I mean, the one thing I've learned, probably my biggest learning in the last sort of 2 or 3 years is a strength-based leadership approach rather than, just looking at everyone and focusing on what can I improve in Chris? What are Chris's strengths? And there's formulas and research you can do to identify that and give more structure to it. But if you start a conversation with someone on these are all the great strengths you have, and I want to elevate and focus in on that. And as a team, we've all got different strengths. So how do we now elevate and work with our strengths as a team? It's a very different conversation you're starting with, rather than, hey, Chris, look, I've listened to everything you've done, but these are 4 things that you need to do better. So, I've found that if you
shift in mindset about the strength versus the pinpoint.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and I know Les spoke about that philosophically in his part of his interview process of coming in, of elevating people's strengths and focusing in on that rather than spending your time on what they're not good at.
Yeah, it's interesting. Paul Roos called it his superpower about what he did well, and he needed to elevate what he did well to be remembered by. And yes, he needed to keep fit and do other things around the game. And then he sort of talk about Steph Curry, the 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
Like Steph still has to worry about defense and rebounding, etc. But he was just honing in to become the best 3-point shooter, doubling down on your strengths. It's a really interesting kind of thought in your head to be remembered by something for your strengths, not about, Steph's still lagging defense, mate, get there and be a generalist.
Yeah, correct.
You have to be remembered for something, I suppose.
Yeah. And actually sitting down and talking to someone about what they think their strengths are. Even just reflecting what are your strengths, and we did this Gallup Strength Finder exercise, which is a bunch of questions that spits out, here's your top 34 strengths, but these are the top 4 to focus in on. And it was interesting with our executive team. We did it across the 5 of us. And one thing that was consistent across all of us was this strength called relator. And a relator is effectively, in simple terms, people that build strong connections on a one-on-one basis. And, we identified that if we maintain that connection between us, and it's not just the CEO dealing with my individual exec, across each other.
You're not up and down, also sideways.
Side to side. We would continue to elevate and keep connected as a team. And with each strength, they've got what they call a balcony, which is when you're operating at your best. So that would be you and me. If I'm connecting with you one-on-one, I'm a relator. I need to build that bond, and then that will maintain. But the basement, when you're not operating as your best, is you can form cliques. So you don't extend outside of your little network of people and start to build other relationships. So it's quite interesting that a strength can have a really positive impact, but equally the same strength can have a negative impact. And it's the self-awareness. You talked about leadership before. It's the self-awareness to know when you are actually operating well, but also the self-awareness to know when you might be falling back into some old traps.
Yeah, the balcony in the basement. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And in terms of your leadership and getting on top of you and being the best at what you do, what are some traits? So you get a good night's sleep, you drink coffee. What's the routine for David?
Mate, it's a good question. Like the first question I got asked about this, just to lead into what I do, like what does a good week look like, was someone said to me, what's the best version of you for me? So it's basically me asking you that question, what's the best version of me for you? And it's quite interesting to get that feedback for people to say, well, if I'm operating at my best, I will perform to give you my best. And you get some really interesting feedback. Have you ever asked that of your partner or what does the best version of Chris look like for his partner or a partner, et cetera? And when it came back to what does the best version of me look like, it came back to, well, how do I set myself up for success? What are your goals? Where do you want to get to? But looking at your personal growth, not just about my career, that's just one pillar of me. What about me as a father? What about me with my mother? My dad passed this year. So what are the things that are important for me with mum moving forward? And then obviously the career, and as I mentioned before. So you start to look at it and then you break it down. Well, if they're all my goals and actions that I want to achieve, there's this point people talk about being high performance. And what is high performance? Well, to me, it's being able to operate when the squeeze is on, when the pressure's on, at a level consistently, not a blip.
Not a blip, yeah. Not this one off going, I nailed the exam, great.
Yeah,
and then it's like
correct. And then the next 3 months you crap. And then, so what does that look like? And obviously, then you break down your week and go, what does the best week look like? The physical side of it, the emotional side of it. For some people, it might be the spiritual side of it. So you start to frame your week up, and it's the little habits. I always find it's the little things done often that sort out the big things.
Yep.
You have your eye on the big things. I want to achieve this, this, and this. These are my goals. But it's how I operate each day.
So you're an incremental person. You're a 1%er.
And I always found if I get myself back, it's the little things that got me back.
Yeah, it's
rather than going, I've got to get that big audacious goal.
Or I'm not going to eat chocolate, right? Instead of you have 4 bits of chocolate, you bring it down to 3.
Yeah.
And then next month you bring it down to 2. Then you bring it down to 1. Then 3 months later you're like, I don't need any chocolate.
100%.
As opposed to like, get it out. Oh, this is tough. I can't do coffee.
Yeah.
I don't do alcohol,
right.
whatever it might be. And you beat yourself up and all this sort of stuff.
So, physical, swim, gym. Yep, I do that regularly. And I find the swimming is a good mental part. Like I don't do it for, trying to, win the 50-metre freestyle because that ain't going to happen. But that's great for me, recovering. Obviously there's the standard hot and cold stuff that we've got a sauna.
Well, do you use your own facilities?
We've got that at Ballymore. So you utilise that. Staff can access that. People do. I do breath work, and I find that to be a really good sort of way to decompress.
Do you do it at traffic lights? I sometimes do it at traffic lights. I'm like, shit, there's a green light, better go.
You're in a state of relaxation. You're doing it well. So I mean, all those things are sort of like resources that you've got access to, and I probably look back and think I wish I had that insight of all of that when I'd started the CEO job. Too often people get shoved into leadership positions. They're told the technical and tactical, these are the goals, this is what we want to achieve, but they're not given the sort of the coaching and the support.
The
toolkit. Well, how do you deal with all of that? Like, you can. And your ego, ego can get in the road early days where you're like, I can handle all this, bring it on. You can't.
Do you look at other people within the group and go, not want to be like them, but some of the habits? I mean, for instance, you've got Brett Clark as chairman. Do you look at people like successful people in different aspects of life and go, I want to cherry pick a little bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's sort of for me. You take the good and bad out of anyone, don't you? Like, sometimes things you see in leaders that you don't admire that you learn from as well as the things you do. Brett's an amazing chair. What he's achieved, him and Maria have achieved in their personal life with the growth of the business, Chemist Warehouse, and where they're at now. But Brett's obviously very philanthropic and loves to give and support. He's had some personal challenges with one of his daughter's early days. Olivia. So how they've dealt with that adversity and people see. It's often they see the result at the end where there's success, but the challenges and the hard decisions is really important. I saw a really interesting thing the other day about choose your hard. I thought it was a good analogy. It was like, you can choose being healthy is hard, being ill is hard. Choose your hard, and it's a great way of, it's not easy being healthy. You got to get up, you got to exercise, you got to have good routine, you got to recover well.
Nutrition,
all that sort of stuff. And it's hard to also be there being ill, but which one are you going to choose? I sort of admire the different leaders over time, and not just within QRU, people that I've been supported or mentored by.
Business leaders, CEOs of Santos's, etc. You have access to these people as well.
It's a wonderful job when you get to talk to all these people that have been successful in different ways, business, entrepreneurs, people that have just are really community-led and purpose-driven. You take as much as you can, but you've got to ultimately come back to what's your purpose, what's your plan.
I'm going to stick on you for a second. Have this section called the Scoreboard moment, which is a moment in your life which is very vivid and very clear. And from that moment, you're like, I remember that so clearly, but my life changed after that.
Well, I've probably already said it. I remember, I'll go back one step. So the Churchy moment being the electrician when I was working at Churchy. So before that, I was working at East as a development officer. So after that, I was working at East as a development officer. I remember I was a bit lazy, I would say. And
did you get a car, by the way? You like driving around in the
mate, I didn't. Car? I didn't get a car. What was my Daihatsu or Porsche?
That person's very important.
But I was going to get a Ford Laser from my brother. I have 3 older brothers. By the time it got to me, mate, I'm surprised it had 4 wheels still on it. So anyway, I got this used anyway. But yeah, back to the job. I remember I was just being lazy, and I got the GM at the time came in and just said, "Mate, you don't pull your socks up, you're going to lose your job." And it was the very kick in the butt that I needed, and I never looked back from that day. But it was it's probably the best lesson learned is that if you don't put the effort in and you don't show commitment to the cause and you don't drive the success of the business, then you're not going to be part of the future. And that was a turning moment.
Very vivid, and you're like, that advice is gold. Do you remember who said it?
It was a guy called Adrian Thompson who's now working as the GM of Netball Queensland for high performance, and he worked in Rugby Australia. So it was just
a big shout out to him.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tomo.
That's it. Now, 2 other things. Your favourite all-time sporting moment is a tough one, I reckon. There's plenty in rugby. Or it might not be rugby, right?
No, well, there's probably 2, one personal and one that from a career perspective. The 2011 Super Rugby Grand Final,
semi-final and final double.
Semi-final and final. I mean, that year was just. Yeah, I look back at the skill, like Quade doing a kick in the dead ball zone to Digby Ioane on the other side and ran a full field score.
It wasn't the goose step that Quade did, but it was something similar in terms of his little stutter.
You just have your mouth open. Look, some of the things he could do. That moment, that crowd, 52,000 roaring at Suncorp, chanting "We Are Red." Yeah. Crusaders, when we had the floods, Crusaders had the earthquakes, so they didn't play at home all year. Brad Thorne was in the team for the Crusaders, and that magical moment with Genia,
the try.
So that and just
kept going.
Yeah, I know.
Keep running.
Keep going. Yeah, so that was an amazing moment for a number of reasons, and I think the other sporting moment for me was actually when we were rowing at school. So we were in the first 8, and we hadn't. Obviously, GPS, the head of the river is the only race. You can win every race, but that's the one you got to win. We'd lost all year, and we ended up winning the head of the river that year, and we won by 0.36 of a second over Gregory Terrace.
Wow.
And
0.36 of a second.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, a bow ball, that big, that much. But it was a good, like rowing was one of those really tough sports where you put so much effort in the early mornings. It was probably harder than rugby, I found, in the sense of teaching your resilience and dedication to your craft. But to then put all that effort in and then win, I can only imagine what the Terrace boys feel like after that as well. They won all year and then lost
the final dance, the big dance. Yes. Thought you might have been saying the Churchy beating Grammar at Northgate that year.
I do remember that. I didn't want to bring that up, mate. I didn't want to. Yeah, that was actually a good game.
It was a great game.
It was a good game.
It ended up
a good team that year.
Tucking off about 10 minutes to go with a broken cheekbone that day on Mother's Day.
Who did that to you?
Joel Madge.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, you'd want someone. Maggie's a great man, but he wasn't the most imposing.
No, it was just it was a knee. Me picking up a loose ball came through with his knee.
Body on the line stuff.
Body on the line stuff is deeply apologetic, I think.
Yeah.
No, he is a good man. Now we've got a new segment, which is the bucket list, which is powered by Swyftx, our new partner, who's powering Scoreboard. Big shout out to Swyftx. But the bucket list is a sporting event that you'd love to get to eventually at some point in time.
I'd love to either an NBA or an NFL grand final.
Like a final series, like a Super Bowl.
Yeah, Super Bowl.
Or NBA finals, next level.
Just the way they put their events on is spectacular. It's a full show, and I would love to feel even college football. Like
some of those NCAA games.
Yeah, some of them.
The music.
It's unreal. You know,
100,000 for a college game.
I know, and they're singing and chanting. I was just some great atmosphere. I think they do it extremely well. I went to a Boca Juniors game over in Argentina. That was great. That was a great experience.
So America's the place to be for a bucket list for David.
Yeah, I reckon so. For a sporting
NBA,
fixture.
NFL, something. We've just finished the NBA finals. There's a pretty big 2 new teams, which is good for things. But David, thank you so much for coming on Scoreboard today and having a chat about your life and your involvement in rugby, and also some leadership techniques and things that you're taking abreast of. A huge moment for rugby in the next couple of years, and tomorrow, obviously, with the Lions. This podcast might not be out before tomorrow, so you got a prediction on the result?
The bookies are putting us out. It's a 27 point
27
lead.
point.
So I reckon
under that,
mate, we will find a way to kick the last goal to win the game.
Oh, okay. This will be great. We play that back. Thank you, and looking forward to catching up. And congratulations on your success at the QRU so far, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Mate, thank you. Thanks for everything you're doing.